You're good.
If you're not on mute, you may want to put yourself on mute, everybody. A lot of background noise.
We're ready, Trent. All right, well, we'd like to call the meeting to order at 6. All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance.
I was waiting for that little flag to come up, but
I see it.
I pledge allegiance
To
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
And to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
under
indivisible,
God,
liberty and
and justice for
liberty
all.
and justice for all.
I pledge allegiance
All right,
to
thank
the
you.
flag. Just kidding. Just kidding.
I'm not sure if it's me, but I've got a I don't know if my internet is lagging or what. So if there's a little lag in between, but if you're not speaking, I'm gonna ask everybody to go on mute. But we're gonna do the roll call. So Madam Secretary, if you could call the roll, please.
Sure. Mr. Carter,
Here.
Mr. Robleski, Mrs. Peasky.
He's absent.
Okay. Miss Martin here. Mr. Brooks,
here.
Mrs. Williams, here, and Mrs. Washington. Did you hear me,
Here.
Mrs.
Thank you.
Great.
The mission of Baldwin Community Schools is to
Preparing students for the promise of tomorrow.
We're on to the mission statement of Baldwin Community Schools. Thank you.
Is she on delay?
The purpose of the open board meeting. This meeting is the meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. We're at F, the consent agenda items. One is the approval of the agenda, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of November 17, 2020, approval of the bills to be paid, general check fund account 74409 through 74477, food service fund account check number 5038 to 5041, Baldwin Promise Authority check number starting at 1317 to 1320.
So moved.
Motion to approve the consent agenda items.
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Brooks.
Correct.
Second.
I have a real lag. My apologies. All I heard was Mr. Brooks.
I seconded Sean.
Is that Ms. Martin?
Yes.
I might have to call in because I cannot hear anybody.
We can hear you. I can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay, I have a real lag. So it's been motioned by Mr. Brooks. It's been seconded by Ms. Martin. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's good. All opposed? All right, motion carried. Presentations.
All right,
Our first
we
presentation is improvement cycles of Mr. Mangrum.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Hi, Bruce.
How's everyone doing tonight? I am going
Great.
to try to present. We're going to see if it's going to go here. So let's see if it'll allow me to share my screen. All right. Can everyone see that or not?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. All right. So at the last meeting, I talked a little bit about our
Yes.
engagement team, and what that team was based on was on a cycle known as an improvement cycle. And so I want to talk a little bit about what improvement cycles are, and really kind of give you a little background. And we're running a really short cycle, improvement cycle, with our outreach and engagement team, where we're looking at things on a weekly basis. Most improvement cycles run on about a 4 to 6 week cycle, where we move through the entire cycle, and you'll see kind of how those break down. But I just wanted to kind of give you a little background in what this is, and why we're making this adjustment to moving in this manner. So at the heart of the improvement cycle is the idea of being a data-driven decision-making entity, right? We want to make sure that all of our decisions are rooted in data, and we're using that data to inform how we improve teaching and learning at our school. And so in that process, there's a number of things that you do as you go to set up that small system cycle. The first thing is that you have to have a big picture idea of what you want. So you want to begin with the end in mind. So what are we ultimately reaching for? What are we shooting for as we go into this process? Then from there, you're going to identify specific goals that are going to show that you're getting to that. Followed by the identification of actions to attain those goals, as well as identifying data and indicators connected with those goals. And then you'll engage in ongoing analysis of that data to determine progress. And so what you end up with is a small system cycle that looks at input, process, output, and feedback. Okay. So when we begin with the end in mind, what we're really doing is we're asking ourselves a number of questions, right? And these aren't meant to be the only questions that you ask. They're just examples of different questions that you might ask as you're beginning to put this process into place. So the first thing that you're going to start with is, what are our priorities, right? And we want to know what are the district's priorities. Where do we want students to be at the end of the year, either academically or non-academically? What are kind of those big picture items that we want to make sure happens at the district in the course of a year? The next thing that you'll do in that process is you'll identify your goals. And so what do we plan to achieve? And we want to make sure that those are clearly identified priorities, right? That those things are measurable. And so you might want to have 2 or 3 academic goals. You want to talk about, where are we now? Where do we need to get? Where do we need to be? And so you also might build in some checkpoints along in that process, because you're not going to attain those goals because they're bigger picture goals in one cycle, right? The cycles are meant to be iterative in nature. You might talk about, non-academic barriers, for example, that are impeding student success, and what we can do to remove those barriers, as well as like I said, you could use this for any system, whether it be academic or non-academic goals. After you've identified those goals, you start to develop your process or your actions that you're going to do to attain those goals. And so you'll consider, what actions are connected to achieving this goal, what actions will produce tangible, measurable outcomes, what strategies and practices are going to move us towards that meeting those goals. You're identifying all those things that you need to do to meet those goals, right? And then you need to know, are we on the right track, right? And so another piece, as you're identifying those actions, right, and in those goals, you also want to start thinking about what are those indicators along the way that are going to let us know, those data points that are going to let us know that we're on the right track to hit that goal, or if we're not on track, that we can make that adjustment in a timely manner. And this is a really key piece, because you have to be able to look at that data in a timely manner. Traditionally, we've done school improvement in cycles of a year, right? We'll put something into place, and then at the end of the year, we'll look at where we're at, and we'll say, how did we do? Well, in a short cycle or an improvement cycle, you're looking at things in about 4 to 6 weeks. And so it allows you to be able to look at it about every 4 to 6 weeks and say, hey, are we on the right track? And if we're not, okay, then we can make an adjustment. And the critical piece to these improvement cycles is that we're going to be, that you engage in ongoing analysis of the data to determine your progress, right? So what does the data tell us? Are we on track to meet our output goals? What needs need to be adjusted and communicated based on the data analysis? What are our next steps, right? And this is really the big change in this process compared to traditional school improvement. So when you look at an improvement cycle, you basically have 4 concepts, right? You have your input, which is what you start with. It might be a vision, it might be a concept, a plan, context, mindset, conditions, whatever that piece is that you're starting with. And then from there, you decide, okay, how do we develop, what is our process to make this happen? And so you start to identify those little pieces that allow you to make the work do what you want it to do. You identify the output, which is in our terms, right, as a school, it's either going to be in a change in teacher and leader action or improve student learning. It can be one of those 2 things, right? That's really what we're focusing on is how are we, and ultimately even the change in teacher and leadership action should work towards improved student learning, because that's our ultimate goal. So are we there yet? What indicators tell us that we're there yet? What indicators let us know that we're on the way, right? And you'll have overall outcomes or overall goals that you're trying to attain as your ultimate output, which is that improved student learning and wherever you set that at. But you're going to have those mid-level markers as well. And then finally, the feedback process, which is probably the most critical process and the process that's skipped the most, right? And the feedback process is the idea is, as we look at that data on that short cycle, every 4 to 6 weeks, whatever that may be determined, right? You're feeding that back through the system, back into input, back into process, and you're making those adjustments in a timely manner. So instead of waiting to the end of the year to find out that, okay, we didn't have the right people in place to make this particular initiative go, we can figure that out in week 4, make the adjustment, right? Try to hire somebody to be in that position to make that work, make the adjustment, and then run the cycle again, and hopefully get the intended outcome that we had anticipated. So again, you're moving through this idea of input, process, output, feedback, and it's going to be iterative in nature. You're not just going to run it once, you're going to run it multiple times throughout the year. And each time that iterative process will change slightly to get you closer to that ultimate output that you're shooting for. So I kind of wanted to put this into terms that's a little bit less educational and more everyday, right? I need to be healthier. So I want to get healthy, and I want to put together an improvement cycle for my health. So I identified, my input then would be that I identified the need to be a healthier person. So I developed a get healthy plan. I investigated diet. Part of my process was that I investigated diets that are moderate, nothing too extreme, because I like to eat and I like to enjoy my food. I changed some of my eating habits, right? And one of those things that I did was reduce the number of carbs that I eat. I also reduced my portion size, and I began to increase my exercise. So in doing those things, some of the outcomes that I found was that I had observable weight loss, and I found that I had more energy. Okay, but I'm still not reaching my target, right? I still have the ultimate goal of being at this certain level of health, but I'm not quite there. So if I run that cycle, and I apologize, these are going the wrong way. It drives me crazy, but I couldn't get them to go the other way. I run the feedback loop through, and I say, you know what? I think my diet's okay. I know that my eating habits are better, right? But I'm not exercising enough. So maybe I need to increase the amount that I'm exercising, or change up the type of exercise that I'm doing. That might be an adjustment that I make to get closer to that ultimate goal of being a healthier individual. So, that's really kind of the concept. I wanted to give you guys an overview of what this looks like. It's actually, it's complex, and yet it's simple at the same time. I think the real interesting thing with this is that in developing that process, you start to identify things that you might not have looked at in the past, right? So not only are you looking at your professional development or your coaching plans, things of that nature, but you're also looking at who does what and how their role impacts that process. And so as a principal, I might look specifically at my role in the process, and teachers will look at their role in the process, and the student support specialist might look at their role in the process. And what that allows us to do is have very, very, very clear focus on what we need to do to get the outcome that we need to ultimately achieve for our students. So with that, I will turn things over back to Mr. Heitmeyer. I will let you know that this was the process that we utilized for our engagement and outreach team. This is also the process that we're using for our EL education implementation. And we are also beginning the process of starting a new coaching and professional development model that also relies on this feedback loop.
Thank you, Mr. Mangum. The one of the reasons that I asked Mr. Mangum to present this tonight was kind of twofold. I had some questions about the engagement team's work that they've been doing, and I've also had some questions about, are we still doing Blueprint? And the answer to those both is yes, we are doing Blueprint. And here's a great way to follow up with last month's presentation to kind of fill in some of those questions about how did we develop that team, what went into putting that team together, to show you that we still are using the Blueprint tools, and as we progress, they progress, and this cycle that we just shared is a newer cycle that they've developed. So as we grow, they grow, and we work hand in hand with them. So that the idea behind that was to kind of tie some things together and tie some questions. And if anybody is interested in observing that engagement team, please let Mr. Mangum know, because they enjoy sharing that information. I know a couple of you have taken part, but please let him know that you're interested, because it's good stuff. So before we go on to Mr. Fournier, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Mangum about that process or about the engagement team?
I don't have a question, but I did get to go and view what they are doing. It is an excellent program that they're running. It is just really something to see. If you can just see how they have every student listed and how they're following them, it's a really, really great plan. And I just want to applaud them for doing it.
Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Fournier has a short update.
Mr. Heitmeyer, so with our small system cycles, this will be something we'll be able to do district-wide?
Yes, yep. Yep, we probably already do some of the small system cycles already, but now we're going to have a system to follow.
I think that's a great idea. Great.
All right, we rolled out our MiFi project somewhere
Thank you,
around,
Mr. Mangum, for that presentation.
and Mr. Fournier has kind of headed that up. So I asked him if he could share some information with us. So, Mr. Fournier, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Heitmeyer. Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me.
Good evening.
Oh, thank you. I was given a great opportunity to facilitate the delivery of these Wi-Fi devices. Initially, the district purchased 100 devices. Mr. Forrester worked with Verizon with that purchase. I believe we took delivery of the first 100 devices the second week of October. Each of those 100 devices were delivered by the first week of November, by the late, I believe it was the 6th of November was when the last of those 100 devices were distributed. Mr. Forster then purchased another 10 per our request. There was still a need. We thought we were close to a saturation point. Of those 110 devices, there was roughly 3 that malfunctioned. A couple more we were able to reset with the assistance of Verizon and got them right back out in the field, got them right back out in the homes. We encountered some difficulties with about 8 homes where they simply, even the devices wouldn't help, either because they had a metal roof or the wood surrounding the house, or just they were located where there wasn't good Wi-Fi, even with our device. Besides that, I think as evidenced by the participation in classrooms, immediately participation spiked throughout our K-12 classrooms. I think that's the best evidence to show how worthy the program was. And I think another way to show the evidence, Trent and I were texting over the last few minutes. I think Miss Washington might be able to use one of our devices. So we might want to look into that. I think I have a couple on my desk that we could lend one to Miss Washington. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'm here for you.
Mr. Fournier, are all the students utilizing those devices?
It's a great question, Ms. Martin. Actually, the great majority of them are. As part of Mr. Mangrum's presentation of small cycles, we were able to identify over the last couple of weeks what students have devices, but we're still not getting a participation from. Mr. Mangrum, feel free to jump in, but I believe it was maybe 15% that he has me working on trying to identify why they have devices, but they're still not participating.
Yeah. So when we looked at, we had about 65% are using them regularly. That's the number that we see that are on consistently, that have the device. Then we have that group of students that is an additional, 8 to 10 that they're just in Wi-Fi deserts, or the metal roof or something is causing their inability to use that. And then we have another 15 to 20% approximately that have gotten the device, but maybe aren't using it like we had anticipated. And so we've been following up with those folks with phone calls and trying to get them to engage.
Those numbers are pretty consistent at the secondary level too. Maybe 8 to 10 students who are just in Wi-Fi deserts. We have one family that's, so far off the grid that they've got to get, about 2 miles to where they get any cell service with the MiFi. So it's a pretty small handful that's still struggling with the MiFis, but in general, very successful.
And to add to the answer for Ms. Martin.
So we can show.
Pardon me?
No, go ahead.
Mr. Cornwell and Mr. Mangrum and myself are now working with the engagement team on how to work with that small percentile of students who have a device, but we're not getting engagement. Sorry, Ms. Washington, I think you had a question.
I was just going to type it because I think I'm so lagging behind here. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to hear me, but I was going to say out of those students or those families that we have given the devices to that have connected, it'll be interesting to see if their grades have improved. Because I know that's a real big concern of a lot of the board members, and we get a lot of feedback from families and community, about kids not achieving. But I'll be really interested to see that once we supplied you with the Wi-Fi, for those who are working, those who have been logged on, if the work is still getting done.
Exactly.
Yeah, just a little aside. I was in an IEP today, and one of our students that received the device, we were looking at the particular as we were going through the meeting. That student's been engaged every day since he received it in November, and the teacher has been ecstatic about the participation for that particular student. So it's just one student, but it's an example of how this has impacted in a positive manner.
But with participation, you can expect to see some kind of academic gain. We had students that literally were off the grid until October, until they got this device, and then we got extraordinary attendance from them, where they were attending each day. But that's a good question, and we should be able to follow it up with evidence of academic gains.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was very much a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Heitmar, I think you got a COVID update for us.
I sure do. I'm trying to figure out how to smoothly go to present and then present. So this month I have shortened the slides, and I'll try to get to the point quicker. So see what we can do here. Present. All right, so this is reconfirmation hearing number 3 for December of 2020. And what we have to do each month is reconfirm how instruction is going to be delivered during the 2020-2021 school year, take public comments from parents and or guardians on the extended learning plan, and review weekly two-way interaction rates. So this slide specifies that we have been in remote since the beginning of the year and currently intend to continue that way through January 15th. Our participation rates, now these are the two-way communication rates. These are not just kids who are tuned in to the online class. These may be phone calls and other forms of communication. But the two-way rates are looking decent. They're not always where we want them to be, but they do look okay. I don't believe there's any reason for the downward track that led to the last week of November being a little lower, but it may have been Thanksgiving now that I think a little bit more about it. The cases continue to rise this week. We've been in the 4,000, 4,500 rate daily. We're at about 250 in Lake County. Today's count was very similar to that. And this is where I usually give you a few more slides, but I think you probably know what's been going on. The rates, they've been in the 4,000s. They never did get to 10,000. They got really close. But right now we're in the mid 4s. The governor did say today that it looks like the efforts that people are taking are working. So hopefully that is the case. So what our recommendation is at this point, we are planning to do in-person NWEA assessments the week of January 18th and January 25th. That'll give us our second NWEA window, so we'll be able to give you some growth patterns in February at the February board meeting. We're going to do that similar to how we did it before, where we bring in cohorts of students. We have a board meeting on January 19th. And at that point, we will make decisions for what probably February will look like. Hopefully, we'll know more information. It's frustrating not being able to know exactly what things are going to look like. There is that chance that if people travel over break, we could be looking at some outbreaks in early January, but at this point we just don't know. So we could potentially begin our next phase on Monday, February 1st. So tonight, our recommendation and the action we'll take later on is to continue with remote instruction through January 15th as previously approved, and in-person assessments on a specified cohorted schedule as we did in October, beginning on January 19th. So I'm going to try to stop presenting now. So any questions, comments, thoughts, anything that Mr. Cornwell or Mr. Mangum would like to add? Anything anybody needs to know on that? It's
What are your projections, Chief?
well, it's really hard to say. I thought that we would get a post-Thanksgiving rise, and we really haven't seen that. So, maybe we're not going to see that. I kind of think that we'll see that after Christmas break, but maybe we won't. But it's just so interesting that we, started out back in March, April to flatten the curve, and we never saw these daily rates in the 4,000s, 5,000s, 8,000s until the middle of October. So, that's when the rates really started to raise. I'm hopeful that maybe in early February we could start some type of hybrid approach to education and get our kids back in school, because that's where we want them. But we don't want to do that until we know that we're not going to create a bunch of starts and stops like we're seeing at a lot of places right now. I really believe that the remote plan that we're on is good for our kids because it's consistent and gives them something to know what's going to happen from day to day. And it also gives the teachers and parents the knowledge of what's going to happen from day to day. I don't want to create the situation where all of a sudden we've got to, keep third and fourth grade home because of a small outbreak, those kind of things. So, as far as a projection, I'm hoping that things look better in January and we can start talking about bringing kids back. But I can't say that yet because it changes so fast.
Thank you. Do you have any idea what the governor's going to be talking about here? Or did she talk?
Any other
was it
questions or
today?
comments for Mr. Heitmeyer?
Mr. Brooks, she did talk today, and what she talked about was how what we're doing in Michigan is working right now to slow the spread. The question that's on everybody's mind is our high schools going to continue to be remote only going in to January? Nobody knows, and and talking to the other superintendents, it's very frustrating not having an answer like that. And it's, as somebody who likes to be definitive, it's tough not to be able to give you guys, a definitive answer and say, hey, this is what it's going to look like. This is what we're going to be able to do, because, the fact is we just don't know yet. Are we still together? I feel like I've lost everybody.
Okay, if there aren't any questions or comments, then we will move on to principal report. I know I'm lagging so bad. I'm at principal reports.
Well, Mrs. Washington, I'll get started and hopefully make this work here. I found it interesting and pretty positive that we started this evening with a conversation about those improvement cycles. Our building network team at the secondary level is right now going through about 12 BCS dates, working with Lisa Francisco from MDE on EWIMS, the early warning interventions and monitoring systems training, so that we can put that into place at the end of January, where we're going to focus in that system. It focuses on attendance, behavior, and course completion. And we're going to really start our focus with attendance primarily. But what I'd like to share with you tonight are the results of some survey questions that we sent to our students the first week of December. Back at last month's meeting, we ended the meeting talking about, really how are our kids doing? And I reached out to my state association, and a few days later got a questionnaire that they sent to all the members. We sent it out to our students during advisory classes on December 2nd, and we took responses through December 7th. Actually, it was the 8th when I remember to shut it off and tabulate results. We had 75 unique responses. I had about 4 or 5 students that actually responded multiple times, so I had to go through and weed some of their duplicates out, but 75 responses was pretty good, I thought, for this survey. It was 34 questions, and that was one of the things a student commented was, if you had made it 10 questions, I probably would have done all of them. So the survey covered several areas, but one of the first questions was just, how are you feeling right now? And really, in general, our kids are feeling pretty good. And I circled a few of these things here in green as we go along. I'll point those out and talk to those at the end. These circled items are the ones that really caught our attention. We had the question on there about feeling overwhelmed, and this question actually tied into some further responses later on. And I was kind of surprised with our follow-ups that most of the overwhelmed is not overwhelmed with school. It's overwhelmed with all the COVID news that they're feeling kind of bombarded with all the time. We had a question about if they were connected regularly with friends. Most of them are in one way, shape, or form. The responses to that were, you name it, how kids can connect with each other, they're connecting, whether it's online gaming, texting, FaceTiming, they really are making those connections still. This one jumped right out early on, and the question of, how are you feeling unsafe? And this is the one where the hair on my back of my neck kind of raised up. And when we followed up with these kids, almost every one of them said, well, I really was just, I'm just nervous going out in public right now with COVID, because not everybody's wearing their mask, and I don't like being around people that aren't wearing their mask. And it took a sigh of relief from me that was their concern. It wasn't other things that are making them feel unsafe right now. We really are doing a phenomenal job of getting food to our families. And this is the funny one, because the student who did respond with the yes, I'm hungry, when we talked to him, he was like, I'm 15, I'm always hungry. So this was in there kind of as a humorous aside, that middle school or high school kids and adolescents are still high school kids and adolescents, and they're going to eat out of house and home no matter what. the question about being worried about your family and worried about friends are kind of mirrors of each other. Most of their worry is general health worry. It's not worry about anything in particular. Just, what will happen if my grandma gets sick, or, my dad's working extra shifts and I don't get to see him very often. And I have a few friends who, they've lost a family member and I'm worried about how they're doing, or these type of worries. Sleep is always an issue with secondary students. This one actually surprised me that they feel like they're getting as much and as quality sleep as they reported to us, especially with some of the worry that's going on that can really affect their sleep patterns. And then these comments were just a handful of the ones that students responded, and how they would appreciate their parents either starting to do or stopping to do. And it kind of ran the gamut from, uplift me and encourage me, to, they're always yelling at me. And one of the comments that I didn't put on here was basically, I know they're stressed about things, but I'm kind of tired of them taking their stress out on me, which I know as a parent is a really big challenge, is to not take those stresses out on your students. So what we did to follow up from this survey is Mr. Nason, Mr. Fricky, and myself broke these responses down and contacted each of the students that gave us a response that was of some concern to us. If they were feeling unsafe, if they were feeling hungry. And what we found in some of those, like I said all along, it was just general concern about COVID. I'm nervous going out in public when people aren't wearing their masks. One student needed notebooks and pencils. So they stopped in yesterday and we gave them a shopping bag full of notebooks and pencils. We've got a supply of them on hand. We had a student who just needed some help getting a daily schedule organized so they could be more successful. So he and Mr. Nason worked out a plan for their, each day and what they need to cover in their Edmentum classes, especially to be on track for the end of the semester. And then we actually had one health concern we got to deal with. We had a student who lost a filling, and we were able to make contact with the dentist, the health department, and get them connected so they could get some of that dental work taken care of that was really causing them some issues. So in general, I think our students are doing pretty well, especially knowing the holidays can be a stressful time. It's exam week for secondary kids. That's another added stress for them. But in general, I was pretty pleased with the results and quite enjoyed some of my follow-ups with them, that we could alleviate some of their stresses. And I will wrap that up and take any questions you might have.
Great, Mr. Cornwell. I've been busy typing in the chat because I didn't know if I was going to come across, if you're going to be able to hear me really well. But that is some really great work. I'm so glad that a survey went out, and 75 students out of the middle school and junior high is probably a really good number to work with. And I really just like how you were able to contact that one student and connect them with a community service and a health need that need to be taken care of. I mean, that is what we do. Like, that is what we're about when we talk about those non-academic needs that our students have. So kudos to you and whoever worked on that with you. That is really great. I'm really glad to hear that.
Thank you. I will say though, a little frustration I have is I did reach out to all of the parents that have emails in the system, both middle school and high school, and it was about 90 parents in total. And other than board members, I had one response from a parent to my inquiry about what help do you need? Can I be of assistance? Would you be interested in doing a virtual meeting? So that response was a little frustrating, but the kids did a great job. And I just looked, Ms. Washington, and your email was wrong in the system, so you didn't get the message. It bounced back to me.
I'll provide my new personal email address to the school.
And Mr. Mangum, if I don't have any other questions, I will let you take over and give the elementary report.
Sure. So Mr. Cornwell shared that survey with me when he received it, and we took a look at it. And after going through it, looking at 35 questions and the way that those questions were worded, we decided that it was probably not age appropriate for our students. So we began the process of digging into looking for a survey at the elementary level. And what we found is not only to my frustration, but to other principals around the area, there really wasn't anything out there. So we reached out to our partners at West Shore ESD. I reached out to contacts at the statewide field team, which was previously known as MyExcel, the folks that help us with the blueprint. And where they spent December actually doing the survey, we spent December creating a survey. And so I'm happy to report that survey is going to be finalized tomorrow. I'm meeting with Jen Rolandhagen from the West Shore ESD to kind of finalize that survey, and then we'll be sending that out to students in January when we return. So hopefully we will also be able to provide you with some of that information around how well our students are doing from a wellness standpoint very, very shortly. Additionally, really through November and December, we have been really diving deeply into our new EL education curriculum, which is our new ELA curriculum. Staff has spent numerous hours during their BCS time, in their during our PD days, working with Laurel Davis from EL Education, and also with our elementary coaches, Joe Anderson and Sherry Hennig, as they've led us through the implementation of this new curriculum. And I think the neat thing is we're seeing the utilization of improvement cycles in that work as well. So as we roll this out, we're building cycles for how we're rolling out. What's our process for rolling out the PD? How effective is the PD? We just spent the last 2 weeks doing classroom visits where between the four of us, myself, Ms. Anderson, Ms. Hennig, and Laurel Davis from EL Education, we were probably in all of our classrooms at least 2 times, and we're able to collect data to then look at how that implementation was going. And right now we're focusing in on learning targets and the utilization of learning targets, which is something we've looked at in the past, right? And having learning targets from students posted. But this goes much deeper in not only looking at is the learning target posted, but are we unpacking that learning target with our students? Are students able to put it into their own words and to tell the meaning of why it's important for that learning target? So it's looking at things at a much, much deeper level, which is really exciting because it's really starting to allow us not to just look at the surface level of curriculum, but really dive deeply into what it is that students are need to draw from that curriculum, right? And helping students take ownership of what to draw from that curriculum. The other piece that's really exciting about that is we, after going through that process, which we actually just wrapped up today, we were able to start having dialogue around what our next steps would be. And so we identified that, yes, we need to, where learning targets are posted and we're unpacking them, we really need to help students really put those into their own words. So how do we create opportunities for students to be able to do that? And so that is a next step. The other piece is we're looking at the assessment aspect of it. How do we know what they're learning from it? And so we talked a lot about that formative assessment piece and what does that look like in this particular curriculum. So it's been very, very exciting. What I love about this is that the improvement cycles, we ran that 4 weeks from November to early December, 4 to 6 weeks. We were able to collect that data, and then we're adjusting now, and we're making adjustments not only to what we're doing from a professional development standpoint, but also what we're doing in the practice in the classroom. So it's just a very exciting time for us as we're starting to implement these things. Outreach and engagement continues to run with their cycles. We met last week, and one thing that we identified is that we are identifying that there is a lag for students when we have those inconsistencies. However, that lag is not as long as what we thought it was. Where we thought it would probably take them about a week to get back on, we're seeing really a lag in that consistency with students of about 2 to 3 days. And so there's some promise there. So, how we go about getting those students back, and then we start to brainstorm, how do we proactively get students to engage right away when we come back on January 4th? What does that need to look like to kind of get them back? And so began the process of discussing that. So again, really, trying to capitalize on these improvement cycles and be able to make adjustments in real time and be much more responsive, not only to teachers' needs, but student needs and parent needs as well.
I have a question for both of you. Are the parents utilizing all the resources that we have, such as keeping up with their homework and seeing what things they may have or may not have missed, etc.?
I would say at the secondary level, parents are not doing real well at keeping up with those things, with all the tools we provided. I had a conversation with a mom today who was pretty upset that her middle school son has failing 3 classes, and she has not heard about this until today. And I asked about, we send progress reports home every 2 weeks, and teachers are calling and emailing and texting. And she didn't know she was missing those phone calls because they're coming through from Google Voice numbers, which is what teachers are using rather than their personal numbers. So she just hasn't, necessarily answered those calls. Another parent reached out today or yesterday when I was in the office, and didn't know that we had Power School. She's had a student in the school, for more than 1 year now, and didn't know that we use Power School and that she had access to see what things were going on with the student. So there are some parents who are doing a great job of keeping up, but there are quite a few that I would say are struggling with it.
Yeah, I think we're kind of on the same. Those that are engaged are very engaged, and those that are struggling are still struggling to engage. And we've tried multiple avenues, from the mailings to phone calls to email to actually even home visits. Mr. Fournier has made multiple home visits weekly. And I will say that we did see a spike after the progress reports. And that seemed to have helped tremendously, where we were relying mostly on email and phone contacts, things of that nature. We really weren't seeing the results that we wanted to see, but we did see a spike immediately, especially in our 4th and 5th grade classes, after we started mailing things home, because, as to the reason why, it's hard to say, but I think at that point, parents were actually getting the information that they needed. Again, we continue to work on this. We continue to reach out to our parents as many ways as we possibly can and try to capture as many as we can. But it's definitely a challenge. And Mr. Fournier, if you're still here, I'll let you speak to this a little bit too, because I know you're doing a lot of the legwork when it comes to actually doing the home visits and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think you've kind of described the common situations we're running up with a lot of our families. A lot of it is just frustration with remote learning. The parents not feeling engaged just because they're intimidated by the technology. In other cases, it's the challenges of parenting during a pandemic. Not feeling confident as a teacher, along with the other demands in the household.
I will say too, we've noticed at the secondary level, it's just been amplified this year. A lot of parents are hyper involved at the elementary level, and then their student becomes a middle schooler and they go hands off because you know, they're a middle schooler, they're a big kid, they have to figure this out on their own. And that situation has been amplified with our remote learning. I don't know if it's any more than ever, just feels a little more amplified right now.
Thank you. I know it's challenging, and I know, you know, the district is doing a lot to assist and help our parents. And I think we're doing more than kind of what our neighbors are doing, but that's who we are. And I know that we'll continue to do that, but don't get too discouraged, because we are doing everything that we can. If we're making phone calls, we're going, we're knocking at your door. I mean, you know, we're doing everything but, you know, getting your child up and having someone to be there with you, which we cannot do that. But just know that we are, I do believe we are doing a lot. And I know that some parents will just continue to struggle because of some outside other issues, but we'll continue to provide those resources as we can. So thank you, Mr. Cornwell, Mr. Magnum, and Mr. Fournier for that. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, I'm going to call for community opportunity. Trent, I don't know if we have anybody out there. Okay, he said no comments, so we'll move on in the agenda, which brings us to discussion items. So, Mr. Heitmeyer, I'll turn that over to you to.
All right. We only have one discussion item tonight. That is consider hiring a student advocate, athletic director. After a lengthy process, we chose Callistus Azuku to become our new student advocate athletic director. And he is here with us tonight just to say hello. And that is the only discussion item. And we're excited to make that recommendation. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer those.
Mr.
Questions for
Hartmeyer,
me? Oh,
go ahead, sir.
I was going to say questions for me because I don't have any questions.
Mr. Heitmeyer, I know you hated giving up that position, but you're going to have to give it up.
Reluctantly, I will turn it over to someone else.
Mr. Brooks, did you have a question?
No, I just made a comment. Are you that far behind?
Yes.
Wow, what are you using, dial-up?
Satellite. Just as bad. Okay. I'm going to take
you're out.
Mr. Fournier up on his offer. I'm going to pick up a Wi-Fi.
Are you out of town, Sean?
So now we're going to move on to communication. Yeah, I'm out in Idlewild. That's why I'm having these problems. So we'll move any communication items. This is our last one of the evening.
I would just like to say I enjoyed the time we spent with the two new board members. I know that could be saved for board members' comments, but just wondering if they were here tonight.
I don't think so.
Lisa's here. Mrs. Williams is here. Mr. Robleski is not here.
New board members, Mrs. Washington.
Yeah, I'm here, but I think he's talking about your new board members.
Were there any community comments, Trent? Okay, thank you. So now we have the action items, and there are two. Hiring of Callis's, you have to say his last name again for me.
Izuku.
Izuku. And then the acceptance of the reconfirmation report and recommendation. So we'll take action item 1. Is there a motion?
Okay, I'll make the motion that we consider I'll like to make the motion that we consider hiring Mr. Callista Suzuku as the student advocate athletic director.
I support that motion.
It's been motioned by Mrs. Williams. Is there a second? Sure, it's been motioned and seconded by Mr. Brooks. Is there any questions or comments to the motion? If not, all in favor? Aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carried. Stay around for a few minutes after the meeting, sir, if you can. Action item number 2, to accept the reconfirmation report and recommendations of the COVID-19 update.
With remote learning through January 29th, and a further decision at the January board meeting.
And a further decision at the January board meeting. Is there a motion?
I motion that we accept the reconfirmation report and recommendations and what Mr. Heitmeyer said.
It's been motioned by Mr. Brooks.
I'll second the motion.
I can't hear if there was a second.
Miss Martin seconded it.
Thank you. Seconded by Ms. Martin. Is there any questions or comments to the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Okay, superintendent items.
All right. Make sure I'm not on mute. Just a few things I want to highlight. I want to thank you all for your support throughout the year. I cannot believe we're finally into December. This crazy year essentially started in March for us, and I think we've done well. We've worked well together, and try to do everything we can for our community and for our students. So I just want to thank you all for making that possible. I cannot count the number of hours we put in during the summer, talking through a lot of these different things, and wondering with our staff and some board members and community members and our partners, asking a lot of questions that we didn't have answers to, and some we still don't have answers to. So just want to say thank you. It's been It's been a unusual year, but I really believe that in the end, we are going to come out learning some things that are going to help us immensely in the future. I want to share a note from one of our teachers. Normally, we would pass this around a board meeting, but this is not normal. So, dear Baldwin Community Schools Board of Education and Administration, thank you for considering the best way to keep our students and their families safe during these unprecedented times. I am so thankful that you are so careful and considerate. I care about my fellow workers, my students, and their families. Your concern has been good for our mental health. Sincerely, Teresa Emmington. And I'm sure you guys have received some other emails very similar to that. Our staff and our community appreciate how seriously we've taken this and the lengths we've gone to make people feel safe and comfortable. It drove me crazy the other night during dinner when one of the news shows was talking about how kids are going to fall so far behind, and how this is just terrible, and it is, and there are kids who might fall behind, but there are good things. And when we worked with Dr. Dominique Smith last week, we talked a little bit about this. We actually talked a lot about this. And one thing he said that then I saw a couple other places is, as hard as this is on kids, we have to remember they're learning to maneuver through a pandemic. They're learning right along with the rest of us. We think this is crazy. They think it's crazy too. So we have to remember that part of it. And I've since seen it a couple other times on Twitter where, we have to remember our kids are learning something that none of us ever learned, and it will help prepare them for their futures in different ways. So to me, that's a good thing that they're learning from that. I do want to talk a little bit about trauma. I'm not going to take up too much time tonight. Mr. Mangum is still working with Dr. Henry from Western. They're working on some schedule ideas, even though it's remote learning, some schedule ideas to try some different things for a couple of students who seem to struggle a little bit with some things. So we're still engaged with Western and look forward to them coming in and working with us in person eventually. But even though we're not in person, they're still there for us and supporting us. So that's awesome. As I said, last week, we had our first 2-hour session with Dominique Smith. He's the trauma guy right now, or not the trauma guy, the equity guy. And, there's about 5 or 6 of us who worked with him last week as we get prepared to share this message with everybody. And the 2 hours went really fast, and everybody was engaged and asking good questions. I'm excited that this is the next step we're going to take to really tie things together. And we'll continue to update the board on this every month. But, as important as academics are, we know that the trauma work and the equity work is just as important to help our kids achieve in the end. So I don't have much else. I want to say, Mrs. Williams, thank you for serving for these last 2 years. We'll miss you on the board. And I'd like to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. It's much needed this year. I know that I've talked to many people who are looking forward to this Christmas break much more so than any they've really looked to in the past, because I think we all really do need to recharge and get re-energized. So again, thanks for your support. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas, everybody. And I'll stop there and turn it over to any questions and to the board members.
Thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Heitmeyer? If not, we'll have board member items. So any board member items?
Yeah. I think someone else wanted to come in.
Yeah, I wanted to say, as I mentioned last year, but I waited too late for the board to do something for the community. And I talked with Mr. Tim Foyer, and he got me a family that could use our help. And we sent an email out to all the board members, and anyone willing to help out, we'd sure appreciate it.
Did we get in contact with you, Mr. Carter?
Yeah, me or Miss Martin.
And feel free, Mr. Carter, to let us know if we can facilitate communication with that family. Thank you for your work.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I do have sizes. We have a couple of females. I do have their sizes. So if you need that information, I can get that to you.
I would just like to comment again on the orientation that took place with the two board members. I thought it was professionally done. Just want to kudos to whoever set up the agenda and the process. I've been here a while, and the orientations have been, I mean, I learned a few things from some of the meetings, the Michigan Association of School Boards, but that was very unique, the way that was put together, and just having an opportunity to sit down with the new board members, more than one board member, I thought it was exceptional. So I want to thank Mr. Heitmeyer and thank Mrs. Washington. I'm sure they were responsible for setting that up, and I think it's going to be a great year. Lisa, we're going to miss you. Stick around. Don't go anywhere.
I promise. Yeah, I would just like to say that it was a pleasure serving on this board for the last 2 years. I learned a lot. I know there's a lot of work to be done, but I think we did get a lot accomplished, at least in the last 2 years that I was on the board. So thanks for all of your support as well, and happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. I wanted to extend a thank you for your years of service. Mr. Robleski did text me earlier this evening. I shared the same with him to thank him for his dedication and your dedication for the time and the commitment that goes into these meetings, your ideas, you're working with us and working through different strategies. And like Mr. Brooks said, don't go anywhere. There's always an opportunity to serve later. And hopefully we can call upon you in any capacity, and you'll be willing to come back and serve with us if you can. So thank you so much for your 2 years of being with us.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome, guys. Thank you so very much.
Callisis, are you still on?
Yes.
I just want to welcome him to the. Oh, well, I know that you are a Laker at heart, but I want to welcome you to Panther Nation, and we're glad to have you on our team and to be here. Since there's no other community people on here, so I hear that your nickname is Bean.
Yes, it is. It's been Bean since I was like 11 years old. I used to play football. You can call me String Bean.
Welcome aboard.
Right. Well, welcome
aboard.
aboard. We're glad to have you. So
Where are you from, sir?
I'm from
Is there
Muskegon.
anything else
Oh,
for the common good of tonight? Oh, I'm sorry.
Is school still starting January 4th, or did they push it back?
January 4th is our return date.
Okay.
Figured that out tonight.
Is there anything else?
I just want to say happy holidays to all of the board members and our administrators.
Yeah, I know I'm like 30 seconds behind.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays and Merry Christmas to everyone. Well, if there's nothing else, is there a motion at 7:18?
So move.
support.
All right. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion carried. Motion carried.
All right. Merry Christmas, everyone. Have a great evening. Keep the Greer family in your prayers. You know, Mrs.